Hey everyone, thanks for joining us today. My name is Sufiz, and here I have with me is Lex Tan. So we're both co-founders of Recur Consult, and we're based in Malaysia and the US respectively. So our topic today will be bridging the experience gap. So let's move on and start off with a quick introduction as to who we are. So as I mentioned earlier, we're co-founders of Recur Consult. So Recur Consult is a behavioral design and gamification consultancy firm. So we basically help companies create impactful experiences using gamification and behavioral design with the intention of driving desired behaviors, whether it's for a consumer experience or a business experience, and so on and so forth. And our main focus is creating an empathetic experience, which means we want to direct motivation in a very positive manner, which is in line with our clients' values and to achieve the metrics for their businesses that they care most about. We've had the privilege of working with Fortune 500 companies, multinationals, and so on and so forth throughout the world in different capacities and across different industries. So let me introduce myself. My name is Sufiz Mohd Suffian. You can just call me Sufiz. I'm basically an experienced behavior design and gamification consultant, and I'm also a speaker and a trainer as well in the realm of gamification and behavioral design. I'm also certified in Octalysis gamification, and I'm also adept at game design, process design, business development, and so on and so forth. So I bring to the company a lot of different experiences, the business side and also the design side as well.
And I'm Lex. Basically, I am also an experienced behavioral design and gamification consultant. I am adept in game design, machine thinking, some basic programming, and UX design. A lot of my background was basically in digital marketing, as well as a little bit of programming. And I'm also a huge nerd, so I play lots of games. I've worked on change management, app development, digital marketing, and most importantly, white space innovation. Again, most of my background is based across different industries. A lot of it is in education, a lot of it is in digital marketing. All that is like what I can bring to the table at Recur Consult.
All right, fantastic. Thanks, Lex. So let's jump into it. We're all here to learn about game-based learning and how it can bring value to learners, our clients, and so on and so forth. So let's talk about why it's important or why it's so valuable to gamify learning experiences. So based on our research, we found that 48% of users are able to increase engagement when there's a game-based motivation incorporated in the experience, which is a significant jump, right? And obviously with the right design, you could probably go high with this number. And 89% of users have seen to spend more time in the experience with gamification. And lastly, 80% of workers believe game-based learning is more engaging than traditional learning methods, which is no surprise. Lecture-based learning is not the most interesting or fun, whereas something with game-based elements or gamification obviously add more engagement to the experience. So what are the clear benefits that we see in gamified learning? The first is that there's a clear increase in learner performance. They are able to perform better when they're in an environment that's very enjoyable and engaging. And of course, the second bit being learner engagement, as we've talked about it before. Engagement is the main selling point when it comes to gamification and game-based learning, because you can see it in the learner's experience and in their eyes when they're in experience as game-based or gamified. They spend a lot of more time, they're willing to kind of put in more effort, and it becomes a lot more seamless and effortless for them as well. The next benefit is that you are able to craft a more personalized experience. Depending on how the learning experience is designed, you can even let them kind of pace themselves the way they want to. So if you have a learner who's a bit more advanced, they can go a little faster. But if you have a learner who's a little slower, they're trying to understand things at their own pace, you can give them that time to take a slower approach to the learning process. And the next bit is that you can give them instant feedback, which is very valuable when it comes to learning. This feedback allows them to kind of gauge where they are in terms of their progress towards a win state or towards the end of the learning experience. And this gives them reassurance as to how far they are and whether they're actually in the right direction. The next one is that you can incorporate creativity in problem solving. So problem solving is a very diverse topic, and there's many ways to approach a problem. So with game-based or gamified learning, you're able to kind of give them that freedom to explore different ways to reach a conclusion or a solution to a problem that you're facing, whether it's a difficult scenario related to a particular business or industry that you've created a simulation in, or it could be a more kind of fantasy-like experience where maybe they're trying to overcome a dungeon or a fictional boss in a particular situation. Whatever it may be, they can always approach it with a creative mindset. The next one is measuring their progress. So they can see how much they've done in their learning experience so far, how much they've yet to achieve. And last but not least is motivation. Boosting learning motivation is probably the most important here, because when it comes to learning experiences, especially when it comes to learning something very difficult and taxing, it's very hard to keep motivation up, right? As we are all familiar with. We're all learners as well, whether it's in school or whether it's on a daily basis, we learn new things. When it comes to learning something very difficult and overwhelming, it's very difficult to complete that task. Whereas with the right motivation, you're able to kind of overcome those like barriers to learning. So now, what about transforming existing experiences? So what about experiences that are not designed specifically from the ground up for learning, or gamified or game-based learning in this case? So let's take two different scenarios. The first one is non-game platform. So what if you want to use a platform that's not designed specifically for learning or even for games, right? It could be a platform that's designed for conferencing or collaboration or remote working and so on and so forth. But typically what they have in common is that they're not always fun and engaging on their own, right? They're more technology focused. So they could be designed or developed with a very clear technology in mind, or it's always designed for a specific purpose or intent, right? So it could be, for example, it's designed to create the most convenient way to have a video conferencing experiences. Or it could be the most technology advanced way to kind of meet people virtually, whether it's using technology like AR or VR and so on and so forth. So they're technologically very impressive. But when you look at the actual experience themselves, they're kind of lacking, right? Because it's all about how much technology can cram into the experience. But the other side of the spectrum, you have games. And we're no stranger to games, right? Whether you are talking about mobile games or console games or AAA title games or any games that you come across, even in physical form, like tabletop games, board games, card games, and so on. Typically, these games are high in engagement and really fun, but they're more experience focused as opposed to learning focused, right? So it's more about having fun as opposed to learning something new. Sure, you can learn some things as you play, but they're not always intended for that purpose. It's kind of like a bonus you learn about, say, if your game is set in a particular history or time in history, then you get to learn about that particular time. Maybe the characters are based on real characters of the past and so on and so forth. So it's more coincidental as opposed to intentional. So now the gap here is that when it comes to creating a gamified learning experience using whether it's games or non-game platforms, there's a lot of things that are missing in the actual design of those platforms and existing experiences. So how do we fill this gap? And how do you bridge it, essentially? So the first thing you want to keep in mind is the emotional journey, right? So how do you map the emotional journey, and how do you identify what emotions you want to include or not include in the experience? How do you drive learning engagement? In fact, how do you even direct it in a way that you want to, so that they pay attention to the right things in the experience to increase the learning outcomes from them? The next one is, how do you leverage on relationships, right? Relationships are really powerful, as we all know, whether it's in a competitive or collaborative way. So how do you inject that into the experience to kind of increase the likelihood of learning? The fourth one is, how do you craft meaningful experiences? Experiences are interesting, but at the same time, they're not always meaningful to the learning part of it, right? So how do you make learning outcomes more effective by making it more meaningful in the experience? And lastly, how do you set the right rules for success? How do you tie success to being a learning experience as well? So meaning that when you achieve success, it also means you've reached a certain stage of learning in a particular area or topic that you're trying to understand more about. So let's talk about the first one, emotional journey mapping. So this is about adding emotion to the experience, whether it's really high emotions like happiness, or maybe something a bit more negative like being angry or upset. So these emotional highs and lows are able to incite engagement and interaction if done appropriately, right? Because think about it, when you are in a game that has a very strong emotional kind of trigger, right? Maybe something happens to a character you care about, right? Maybe you spend hours kind of learning this character that you've been controlling, learning about their history and backstory, and then something happens to them. Whether it's something great, which makes you really happy, such as a moment of success in maybe a particular experience or a particular situation that they were thrown in, something good happens to them, or something bad happens to them, maybe a loss that they incurred, they lost another character that means something to them. So all these things allow you to kind of connect to the experience and the character emotionally, driving further engagement, and also makes the interactions that you do in game more meaningful. So how do you bring that and put it into a learning context? So if you're able to kind of transition an experience by adding more emotional triggers, whether it's positive emotions or positive valence or negative ones, this allows you to create a very engaging experience, and the learner becomes more committed to it as well. At the same time, this allows the learner to kind of remember the lessons a lot more effectively as well, because emotions allow us to connect certain situations and memories a lot stronger, right? You always remember the best thing that's happened to you and also the worst thing that's happened to you, right? It's just the way we are as humans. It kind of tells us that, look, we should remember this experience because it's important to our maybe survival or our safety, or just to us in general, whatever it may be. And you always remember the strongest emotions. So if you're able to incite strong emotions in an experience, especially a learning one, regardless of whether it's by using a game platform or a non-game environment, you're able to kind of increase this engagement and the memorable element of the learning component as well. But at the same time, you want to be careful not to go too far, because you don't want to create a dissatisfying experience for the learner. If it becomes so tense, or you make them so angry to the point it becomes traumatic for them, obviously it doesn't send the right message, especially when you're trying to teach them something, right? They probably should just shut down and just ignore whatever, because it's just too uncomfortable for them to kind of remember and recall. So you want to make sure you don't take it too far. At the same time, you don't want to make it too boring and too low arousal, right? So if it's too boring or it's too calm and it's too slow, there's not enough emotional engagement either. So knowing the right balance in the experience is always great. And this can be done by having the right mapping in place. So understanding when do you want them to feel happy, when you want them to feel a bit more tense and angry, and kind of switching it up every now and then, right? And mapping this out and testing out with a group of people and getting them to kind of give you the designer their feedback in terms of experience can also allow you to tweak the experience and the emotional journey more effectively as you go. Another thing to keep in mind is cognitive friction, right? So this occurs when there's a mismatch between the outcome of the action and what they expect. So for example, a user may come in expecting something to happen or something to go in a certain way, but the actual reality is very much different. And this can always spell disaster, right? Because they can feel frustrated and it can impair the user experience, which in the end can jeopardize the entire experience. So if you feel uncomfortable or you feel stupid in the experience, right? Nobody likes to feel stupid. This will kind of create cognitive friction. And when there's cognitive friction, it's either they will just drop off from the experience, disengage, or just not really take it seriously. And when it comes to learning, that's not something you want to happen, right? So always identify any instances of cognitive friction in the experience and try to minimize or remove it entirely if possible. The next one is driving learning engagement. So we all know as game-based or gamification practitioners how to build engagement, right? Adding game elements, making it fun, maybe adding a storyline, whatever it may be. We all have our own techniques and approaches. But what we're going to talk about is directing attention with engagement. So we know how to use these different mechanics and elements, especially when you talk about using an existing experience, whether it's an existing game or a non-game platform. You want to identify what mechanics are available at your disposal, and kind of tailor the experience to direct attention the way you want to, right? So getting them engaged with a particular part of the experience so that you're able to get them to focus their attention on winning, right? Obviously, winning is really important when it comes to a game, right? Why else would you play a game if there's nothing to win? Whether it's to win as a team or win against the competition or beat the game entirely, right? So by directing attention to win, you can then decide what criteria they must achieve to win the game. And this could be in line with learning, right? And sometimes you can even use this to kind of pull out really honest behavior. When it comes to things like assessments, or if you're trying to just understand the learners a bit better, right? You are able to use game elements or these mechanics to kind of like pull out real behaviors. For example, you can always ask a learner, are you a good team player? And obviously they'll probably say yes. But when you put them in a situation where they have to be a good team player, you get to see whether they can really live up to what they said. And this creates an environment to kind of incite honest behavior more naturally, right? So then you can see whether they can actually be a team player or even be a leader, for example. So this allows you to have a better understanding of who they are, especially when you're trying to assess for certain abilities or just how competent they are in this particular topic or field, whether it's leadership or teamwork, or maybe in a particular topic such as, say, problem solving or creative thinking and so on and so forth. Putting them in that environment and directing their attention to mechanics that will kind of show these behaviors a bit more naturally and honestly is something that we want to strive for when it comes to creating a learning experience, whether it's using a non-game platform, such as even maybe Zoom, right? Zoom is not intended for learning per se, it's more for conferencing, but how do you use this to create a engaging learning environment and direct their attention so that you get to see more honest behaviors that you care about, right? Or even using a game, say like Angry Birds or whatever, or maybe a game that's a bit more robust. I think Angry Birds is a bit too simple, but a game, whatever game that you think of, whether it's Minecraft, which is a really popular game, which is also a sandbox, and one which allows you to create more things in it. So all these different environments may have different mechanics involved that allow you to direct attention in a different way. The next bit is prompting self-reflection, right? This is really important, especially when it comes to learning, because you want the learners to be aware of where they stand, especially when you're trying to gauge or get them to learn something they may already know, but may need help in. For example, how to be a better leader or how to be a better problem solver, and so on and so forth. So knowing what their strengths and limitations are in these particular areas helps them to kind of improve, right? If they think that they're already good in a particular area, then they may not feel the need to improve themselves. But if you put them an experience that basically shows them like, look, maybe you're not as great as you think you are. Or yeah, you are good, but there's some things that you might want to consider working on. You want to do more of this or less of that, and so on and so forth. So having an environment that prompts self-reflection, whether it's by its own naturally through the experience or by having triggers or nudges that kind of like make them think about what they're doing and whether they're doing it well or not, helps create meaningful self-reflection.
So speaking of self-reflection, basically, like what I like to call that is that we are creating moments that people can call their main character moment, right? And whenever we create experiences, it's good for the participants to basically have their main character moment where they take initiative, they make decisions for themselves, and they kind of like process and deal with the consequences of their actions. Relationships really help in that aspect because when you think about it, relationships are a core mechanic of like games, for example, role-playing games of any kind, whether it's Dragon Age or BioShock or like Elder Scrolls, Skyrim. Then you become the main character there, and everything that you do affects the world around you. You can see that because there are relationships in these games. There's a reputation, you know, there is people suddenly see you as a hero or they see you as a villain based on whatever actions you do. And this is done through competition and collaboration. You could have competition, right? You could have a rival. Like for example, in Pokemon, you are, fighting against different gym masters to try and become the best Pokemon master of them all. And that competition creates that kind of urgency. And now instead of saying, I'm going to take 100 days to learn this, you're saying, no, I need to learn this within 2 or 3 days, because otherwise I'm going to fall behind. Everybody else is going to go surging ahead of me. This motivates people to basically move out of their comfort zone. Instead of waiting the 100 days, they can say, I'm going to try and do it within 2. Collaboration, on the other hand, like it's really great for breaking down silos, especially in organization. Now, collaboration to do like say tasks in a virtual setting, like Sufiz mentioned, a sandbox game like Minecraft, allows learners to kind of work together. They forget the fact that they are manager and like frontline worker. They basically say, oh, we have 4 people right now in this room and we need to solve this problem. How do we do it? This breaks down the silos, improves communication, and it supports openness, it supports trust, supports respect. And when you look at people interacting with either their NPCs like AI competitively or collaboratively, as well as like other players, other human beings, you get to see very clearly leadership qualities. There are certain things that people will only show whenever they are in a relationship, right? Like when you are in a friendly relationship, a rivalry, whether it's an antagonistic one, it's like, oh, this thing is challenging me now. How do I overcome it? And could be an obstacle in a game. And that's how competition works sometimes, right? Moving on. Crafting meaningful experiences, going back to the main character moment, right? Everybody wants to be the main character sometimes, even in your daily life. Sometimes you have a main character moment where you're like, I want to do something nice for that person today, right? And then your day just becomes that much brighter because you set the tone for it. So in this case, storylines and context help you set the tone for learning, for growing, for advancing. We can do that by creating immersive environments, right? Like there's a reason you are stuck in the escape room with 3 people and there's a sense of urgency. You need to get out before, everything falls apart, You have characters, you have friendly characters that want to encourage you no matter what you do, that are there to cheer you on whenever you're down. They are the best friends you may ever have. And then you have rivals that are there to goad you on and frustrate you and just tease you whenever you're so close to the finish line. Those are important as well. Adding an engaging storyline and narrative provides context to your actions in the experience. And that will help you link lessons to gameplay. Now, whenever you think of trying to solve a problem with that one character, maybe they're in the back of your mind now, reminding you, hey, just so you know, integrity is a core thing in this company. Don't lose yourself when you're trying to reach those goals. And those are important lessons to remember. Whenever you can refresh people's memories by bringing these lessons into their real life, the closer they'll be to achieving a win state in their real life as well. Right, setting rules for success. Now, it's all fun in games to have a sandbox experience, which many games have. But even in a sandbox experience, there are going to be rules. Every game is just a voluntary voluntary participation by players or people who agree to a set of rules and then they play by them, right? So the good thing about rules is that they tell you, in order to win this game, here are your objectives. In order for you to reach 100% completion, this is what you must do. It's a very clear step-by-step, right? And sometimes real life isn't all that clear, but it helps you think about your goals in that way. Breaking down a larger goal into smaller sub-goals, that's what project management is all about. So setting limitations to the experience also actually encourages creativity. For example, if you have a mountain that you have to climb, Some people will say, oh, I'm going to build a helicopter and fly over it, right? But some people are going to say, you know what, I'm going to take it slow. I'm going to take my, step by step and enjoy the scenery as I go. Setting limitations is not meant to kind of discourage people or anything like that. In fact, it's to encourage creativity. Setting the rules of the game so that you can bend them, because it's more interesting that way. And even more so than that, it's like everybody has their own way of winning. Also, whenever you have feedback mechanics, then you can kind of like, you can learn. Whenever you try to build your helicopter to fly over the mountain, maybe you realize, oh, maybe I'm lacking a budget. Maybe I am lacking a certain material, or I'm lacking mechanical skills. What do? How do I earn money? How do I gather resources? How do I talk to and maybe hire somebody who can do the things that I cannot do? These are all things that still progress a person towards learning what they can or cannot do, and what they can personally make a decision to progress. There you go. That's how you win.
So now we've talked about those 5 real components, right? Emotional journey mapping, driving learning engagement, leveraging on the relationships, creating meaningful experiences, and also setting rules for success. So how do we actually create an engaging, or how do you bridge an experience gap using platforms that are not intended for gamified or game-based learning, whether it's a non-game platform or a game, right? So let's look at some examples, right? The first is Gather.Town. So Gather.Town is, if you're not familiar, it's a virtual environment that allows for very seamless web conferencing, right? So it's intended for remote working. So for example, instead of having a physical office, right, which is something that we struggled with the pandemic, is instead of having a physical office, you could have a virtual office instead. So have everyone log in at the same time, like you would kind of walk into the office as well. And you can actually see each other represented by your own unique avatar. So you can customize your own avatars, and you can walk around an office, a virtual office space. So you can have your own office room, you can have meeting rooms, you can have a lobby, you can have everything. And you can invite other people to come for meetings or discussions as well, including people outside your organization. So this created a very interesting experience. And the most important thing that they wanted to include was having a very seamless video conferencing or web conferencing feature, right? So all you needed to do was walk up to a person with your avatar, to their avatar, and immediately a window will appear on your screen showing that you're already engaging in a video call with them, right? Like you would in the real world, you just walk up to somebody and you can talk to them, right? You don't have to send them an invite to join a call. You don't have to set up your microphone and all that. Is already there, right? You've already set it up in advance. You can just walk up and talk to people. And this could be many people at the same time. Or you could be doing a presentation to many people at the same time, and they could just be there listening to you as if you're speaking on a microphone, right? So they wanted to, Gather.Town is intended to kind of mimic and also elevate that sort of experience that you get in the physical world by transferring to the virtual environment, right? And during the pandemic, a lot of companies found value in this sort of experience. At the same time, you can also interact with objects, enter different spaces that are private only to you or to certain people, so you can have a private conversation. You can explore different rooms and areas, and you can also teleport to different locations, right? So, which is something that we can't do in the real world, unfortunately. How convenient would that be? So some mechanics you can find is that you can customize your avatars. You have proximity-based video calling, which means it's how close and how far you are. So you can walk up to somebody and you can hear a conversation, or you can walk away and the conversation gets softer and then it just stops for you entirely. You can also send chat messages in the chat room. You can also have a private open networking space. You can password protect certain areas. Maybe you want to keep some places a bit more secretive and so on and so forth. And you can customize the environment as to whatever you want it to be with their own extensive library of assets, or you can add your own if you want, right? So the sky's the limit. So what we did was we wanted to take this platform, which is obviously not intended for learning. It's more intended for collaboration or for networking or communication, whether it's with your colleagues at work or just having a meeting with people or just maybe a gathering of friends. We wanted to kind of bring this experience to a learning environment. So what we did was that we identified those mechanics, and then we thought to ourselves, what can we do to make this interesting? How do we make this a fun and engaging experience? So we created a virtual treasure hunt, right? The intention was to kind of build collaboration and teamwork, because you would have to come in as a team and kind of explore the area and find out how to progress from one room to the other. And the first team that reaches the end of the treasure hunt will win. So we added different riddles and clues throughout the virtual space, and they came in the form of text, images, even interactable objects, right? So for example, you could be walking around and you just see nothing, right? It could just be random objects that could just be decorative. But if you walk up the right thing or you follow the right path, you can find a note or maybe just an object that says something. And that could be the next clue to finding out how to get out of the room you're currently in. Or maybe a room that you will be in later on. It's a clue that you get in advance that you may or may not be aware of, right? And we can always also add traps to kind of punish them or kind of set their progress behind a little bit if they make the wrong move, right? If they walk into the wrong place or they do the wrong thing, we can basically teleport them to say the beginning of the entire treasure, or at least to the beginning of that room they're in, right? We can also add hidden passageways that they wouldn't find unless they found a map or a clue that was hidden somewhere. For all you know, it may look like a wall, but it's actually a secret doorway that you can walk through, and you're actually walking a passageway that you cannot see. But if you make the wrong step, you will also be punished and sent back to the beginning of that particular hidden passageway, for example, or even the beginning of the room or the entire game, right? We also password protected certain areas, and they needed to find the actual phrases or passwords by solving puzzles or riddles. And sometimes we will even send different players to different locations. So you could be on the same team, but each of you are placed in different places. So you have to kind of work together from afar. And because there's proximity-based calling, you cannot talk to each other like you're on a Zoom call. You would have to be close enough to actually hear each other, right? So they would need to really work on their own for the benefit, for the sake of the entire team. So we could kind of replicate certain physical treasure hunt elements in a virtual world, at the same time add certain things that you wouldn't be able to in the physical world, right? And having that penalty system that I mentioned earlier also makes them really think about their actions, as opposed to just randomly walking through every single door that may or may not be a trap. By being focused on not making mistakes, they become more aware of the clues and the lessons that they've learned and apply them more effectively. So for example, it could be how to be a better leader, how to collaborate with each other, how to be more patient and transparent with each other, how to kind of translate information more effectively so that you are able to solve puzzles or problems together as a team quickly. Because at the end of the day, the focus is not to just complete the treasure hunt, it's to be the first team to do so. And having multiple puzzle rooms makes it interesting because you can walk into a different environment each time. For example, if you see the images on the right, they're both from the same virtual treasure hunt. One looks like a garden where they basically, which is the bottom right image, there are 3 different portals they have to walk into, and the only one portal is correct. The rest will actually send them somewhere else, which will kind of hinder or remove their progress. The image on the top right is a library that they have to walk around and read certain things or different books or notes to find answers to a particular puzzle or riddle that they're trying to fix so that they know how to get out that library, right? So these are different environments that they can walk into. They were able to customize using Gather.Town. So when you think about it, when you look back at those 5 components that we talked about, which is emotional journey mapping, by having this different experiences, you're able to give them a moment of success, of happiness, or even a moment of frustration with the penalty systems and getting punished for making a mistake. And you're able to kind of drive the engagement in a meaningful way because the way they are engaged is that they want to solve this and work together. So the engagement is in basically working together as a team and solving it properly and finding the right answers to the questions that they have in front of them. And leveraging on that relationship of being a leader or having team members to work with. The next bit is crafting meaningful experiences, because even though you come into a platform that's not intended for learning, but transforming it to a gamified learning experience by adding meaningful moments or meaningful elements to the experience allows you to create something that ties back to the lessons that you want to instill, which in this case was leadership and teamwork and problem solving as well. And we also set clear rules for success, right? For you to win, you have to be the first team to get there at the end. And for you to get there the fastest or get there at all, you have to make sure you follow the rules the game has dictated, which is solving the puzzles, getting from one room to the other, and also making sure you minimize or eliminate mistakes as much as possible, because that will hinder your progress. So let's move on to another example.
So we mentioned Minecraft earlier, and Minecraft basically was a 3D sandbox game created in 2009, I believe, and was sold to Microsoft for $2.5 billion in 2014. Surprisingly, it is still around today and still as popular as ever. In fact, there was a large update that came out a couple of months ago, and it's a really enjoyable game. So the premise of the game, right, is that it's digital Legos, basically, except instead of having, well, you have several modes of play. One of them is a creative mode where you have unlimited Lego blocks to kind of build from. And the second, which is generally what people play at, is that you have to gather resources from the world around you. So if you look at the picture, you can see that everything is made out of blocks. And so you would have to dig up a dirt block, for example, if you wanted to put it somewhere else. You can cut down a tree and then harvest the wood blocks from it in order to craft tools. So for example, one of the first things you can do in the game is to cut down a tree, grab the wood, build a pickaxe, and then you can start mining for metal ore that you can then create other things from. Now, because of how diverse this game is, basically, you can create all kinds of experiences, and people around the world have created all kinds of experiences from this. Whether it is a role-playing game, you know, where you can buy and sell and trade, and you can create your own economy, like a mock economy game. You can basically use the game elements to create like leaderboards and timers. So in this case, you could have a obstacle race with 100 players, for example, and you can basically race to the finish line and get through the different challenges. There are Redstone pseudo programming language, basically, which is used to visually show how to teach children how to code, basically, in many different countries. You can also use, they're also, they would call them electric circuits, basically, or logic circuits, which then can also be used to create, to teach people basic circuitry. What happens when you have a AND or circuit, for example, and you can visually see that happen. There's also about 150 different block types. You have people all around the world that create block types, new ones every single day. 400 unique items, over 30 different mobs, and all that was created by one person. And now the world has taken it over and said, great, I'm going to create more and more. Now, the reason why we chose Minecraft, right, was because our client basically requested a team effectiveness program, also known as team building, but it had to be done remotely. And so because of this, we were thinking, all right, we need something that could accommodate maybe 25 and up people. They had to be able to be sorted into different teams. And we want them to basically see themselves as equals, like not as manager and frontliner again, or you know, subordinate, but for them to think as, I'm the red team, right? I have 5 people in the red team and I want to beat the other teams in this competition. We designed different levels, right? We had one level that was a series of escape rooms, basically, that was somewhat timed, you know, like we would challenge people to try and stay ahead of the other teams. And you had all kinds of different puzzles. So they were puzzles that would be more familiar to old timers, right? Like treasure hunt kind of style, you know, a couple of word games that were thrown in there. And then you have challenges that are hand-eye coordination, but requires like 3 people. pressing buttons at the right time, and trying to figure that out, or in the right sequence. So the thing about Minecraft is that we recommended that our clients did this while also using voice chat, external voice chat, because then it made it easier for teams to kind of communicate among themselves. But there's also chat, like in-game chat, like text chat and stuff like that, that also make it so that certain levels you could technically limit them. You could say that, no, you can only text each other, like you can't talk. And therefore, your mode of communication has changed, your manner of communication has changed, which echoes the real world. Talking through email is not the same as getting a phone call. Why is that? What kind of communication is best used for the message that you're trying to send and receive? And also, we basically had a penalty system that would punish people basically whenever they make mistakes. So in most games, I would like to say that a penalty system should not discourage people to the point that they drop off, like talking about cognitive friction, right? The thing about games is that most games will only give you a short, quick, like painful game over, screen, and then they will bring you back to your low point. They say, okay, try again. Because the idea of a penalty system is not to tell people, please give up. It's to tell people, try again, please continue. So one of the levels that we created was a giant maze, as you can see in the bottom right image over there. The teams were actually broken up into different players being in the maze, certain players being above the maze, and certain players being so far away that they could not see the maze at all. Now, the reason why was because we wanted to simulate basically like managerial positions, right? Like certain people have eyes on the ground, so they can tell people what managers can't see, whereas managers are kind of like they remove obstacles in a person's path, and so therefore we made it so that the managers had control over certain things, like maybe it could remove obstacles, maybe they could open a new path to that wasn't there before. And at the same time, we have higher up managers that have the instruction book in front of them, but they can only deliver instructions, right? They can't actually be on the ground. So when we replicated that situation, it kind of makes it easier for people to experience the frustration themselves. And then when we talk about it later on, it sticks with them that much more. And now they have a shared experience, a shared memory that they can refer to in the future whenever they face these problems again in real life. Hey, remember that team building situation where it's like, I was looking for button A and you can tell me where button A was? I feel like that right now. Let's talk it out. Let's discuss this. That's what a good team effectiveness program does. It breaks down those walls and creates a better path forward for communication. Right. Moving on. We also, this Fungus is an open source tool. It's created by Snozbot, right? And it is actually it's for creating interactive storytelling games in Unity 3D. Now, Unity 3D basically is used by many people to develop games, experiences, even like videos by many people around the world. It is open source as well. Fungus is just one of the tools that enhances it in a way. Now, it creates a really easy way to do visual scripting and interactive storytelling. In this case, we usually visual novels, point and click adventure games, children's stories, hidden object games, e-learning apps, and so on. It can also be used for more robust games and experiences. I just personally do not have that experience. Now, some of the available mechanics and elements are you can drag things over. So you can say, hey, out of these 10 items, I'm going to put these 3 items in my backpack, for example. Timers, like whenever people make a decision, you can say you have 5 seconds to make that decision, or the decision will be made for you. Provides a little bit of urgency and pulls out a couple of those honest responses that we were talking about earlier. Decision trees makes it so that people feel that the sense of agency, right? Like whenever you choose to do, whether you choose to side with person A or person B, person A and person B remember that you made that choice, and now they react to you in the future moving forward. And that kind of solidifies in your mind that, hey, sometimes the right decision may not be the most popular decision. And that is something that is memorable. That is something that will stick with you. Nobody likes to be disliked, but sometimes you got to make the right decision for yourself. Point system. Point systems are, they can be upfront, right? Like you can say that, oh, I have, my reputation is now at a 50 out of 100 right now. And that could be a very clear indication of a point system. But they could also be invisible point systems where maybe in the background, you're actually being assessed for something different. And so your reputation may not be the win state that you're actually going for. It could actually be, okay, how many projects did you actually complete based on the decisions you made? That's a clear assessment. Now, multiple story routes. Again, going back to interactiveness, giving people that meaningful experience. Not everybody wants to read a story because then they feel like they may not relate to it. Or when I say a story, I mean in a storybook. A storybook generally, basically, is linear, right? It goes from the beginning of the book through the climax and all that and go to the end and you're good. It was a good story. It was a good roller coaster experience. But multiple story routes are more like your choose your own adventure book, where you're flipping from page 27 to page 63 and then jumping back to page 32. It makes it more interesting because whenever you play an experience like this, there's a replay value attached to it. How many times have you played the same game like 5 different times because you wanted to see the different ending, right? Because you're so invested in these characters, you want to see what could have been. And that's the beauty of games, is that you can create that kind of experience, the what could have been, right? So over here, we basically use Fungus for what we call an integrity simulation. So again, going back to assessing a person's integrity, we basically hid an integrity framework into this game. So this unassuming little visual novel, basically, is just, you know, us going through a click, like simple, make a decision in the next 10 seconds kind of a situation. But there is a story behind it, right? And because of that, again, it pulled more honest answers from the players because the players thought that, oh, I really need to worry about my reputation here because, I mean, I don't want to be assessed badly in terms of reputation. But again, going back to where doing the right thing is not necessarily the most popular thing, the players actually could have their reputation dip into the red and actually still be doing things in the most with the most integrity possible. And that was honestly what we were secretly assessing. Over here, they follow different storylines, they make a series of decisions, it leads to different outcomes. And that pressure of not just the timers, you know, like the pressure coming from peer pressure, coming from mentor pressure and stuff like that, whether it's characters that you like or dislike, that changes how people behave. And that's the honesty that we want to see.
So we've reached the end of our presentation. So thank you so much for listening in, and we really hope that you enjoyed what we shared today in regards to how we could bridge the gap with those 5 things that we talked about: emotional journey mapping, driving learning engagement, leveraging our relationships, creating meaningful experiences, and lastly, setting rules for success. So we want to kind of part ways with a quote, right? So the quote is by Maya Angelou, a American poet. So people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. So just like every learning experience, if you want to gamify something especially, it's always important to think about how you make them feel in the experience, because that's the one thing they'll probably remember the most. And if they associate a positive experience with a particular lesson, they're able to remember it a lot more and a lot more consistently as well. So thank you so much. Really appreciate you listening in. And if you ever want to reach out to us, or you have any questions, or you just want to chat, want to make friends, drop us an email at hello@recurconsult.com, or contact us via mobile, or just visit our website, recurconsult.com. So thank you so much, and we hope you have a wonderful day ahead and enjoy the rest of the conference.
Right. Bye.